we cannot ignore the fact that we know what happened over the entire year, and we're familiar with the effort to emasculate the army and how it was harmed during the process, because the focus of the protest could have been legitimate if it didn't touch the army. If Shikma Bresler, who I'd never heard of before, tells me that the Prime Minister won't have an army in September, and if Eehud Barak, whom I worked with, explains to me that human lives will be lost, I want answers. I want to know how this is connected so perfectly, not metaphysically, but physically, to the catastrophe that we are contending with. Whether there's a connection or not, I want an explanation. When Shikma Bresler says there won't be an army, a lot of ears around us are listening to that. Not only are they listening, we shouted and we screamed and we didn't leave a single stone unturned, and we spoke, and I went from studio to studio. I didn't earn a shekel the whole year. I did the whole thing voluntarily, and I emphasize that. I've never been a spokesperson for anyone. But today, when we are after this terrible catastrophe, people say to me, we don't understand why you're doing this. We don't understand. And I say, listen, the tragedy is right in front of us. Everything is working backwards. And ultimately, when we reach the moment of truth, it's important to me that the public know I'm speaking out of rage, because ultimately on the day that it happened, and who am I don't consider myself anything special. I see myself at my genuine size. I don't think I'm greater or less than anyone else, a citizen like anyone else. But when I saw those things, and I screamed out about them. People asked me, who made you the boss? And I said, listen carefully. I see the reality right in front of me. I see the criminalization. I see the criminalization of democracy. I see the disempowerment of the governmental institutions. I see the violence and how close it is to physical violence. I see how strategic routes and highways are being blocked. I see people working against the state. On October 7th, I said to a friend, what didn't we do to prevent this moment from happening? And of course, we never imagined anything like this. When you hear Barak saying it doesn't matter what the price will be, there will be a price in human lives, and until there are bodies floating in the Yarkon River, so we got bodies somewhere else, and it's just as terrible. Is this the man that you're still asking who he is? I think that Ehud somehow, I don't know if he did or didn't mean what he said, but he's still inside that plan, because I see him on foreign channels speaking against the state and against the mobilization of our soldiers for victory when we have an existential threat hanging over us. That's what he says outside to millions of people in the world. It's extremely shocking. And I'm going back to the matter of the bodies floating in the Yarkon. If there will be here among us another story of a plot or a betrayal, or even something that is untrue, but something that gains a foothold among certain groups in Israeli society, there will be a very deep crisis that could, in the coming years, lead to a civil war. So if it's with Eehud Barak or without Eehud Barak, he knows how to plant the materials that will ultimately cause the friction between the first Israel and the second Israel until the catastrophic result is obtained. From the hell and from the tragedy that has happened to us, we didn't see any refusal. No one refused. There's more than 100% of people showing up, officers, pilots, soldiers, 8,200, everyone. Perhaps this should indicate to us how much this campaign was a rotten fruit of certain people with certain goals, of certain advertising agencies, but it didn't have a real foothold among the people. Yes, the entire campaign was a lie from the outset, from the dictatorship campaign, which was completely untrue, the opposition to the legal reform, which was nonsense, and especially when you look at the matter of the High Court of Justice and the war, it was a surreal campaign. They should never have touched the IDF, and I think Gallant was mistaken in this area in his accepting approach. His message as Minister of Defense was that he wants to send a social message through the army rather than a military message, but he's not an educator to teach people how to behave. He should have insisted that all orders must be followed strictly, and to make especially sure to maintain the fact that the army is subject to the orders of the political echelon. If he had emphasized those things, perhaps some of those things could have been prevented.